Hi and welcome to the second week of the Cross-Platform Journalism and Content course with me, Craig McGill, and obviously while this is the main teaching for this week, you will also find supplemental links at the Twitter ID at Main Journalism and also on the course Moodle and online forum, which can only be accessed if you're registered for the course. Now this week we're going to look at two main issues, both defined by one thing, this idea of the brand you, the brand journalist, the brand individual. And it may seem slightly pretentious, but this has been a key growth area in journalism in recent years, because what you have is that journalists no longer think they have to go and work for The Guardian, the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or other organisations to make quite a considerable name for themselves. They can go online and just through steady publishing of content, through engaging and through going online to find an audience, they can build it that way and then either go and work for a larger brand with the promise of bringing their audience with them, or continue to work themselves and monetize it in a way that works for them via publishing ebooks, via publishing white papers, via putting themselves out to hire for others, through speaking fees and so on. But the point is this, as was made in the course material for the first week, there's never been such an easy time for a journalist to get out there and promote themselves, to not sit back and just wait for someone else to do it, to go online, find audiences, find contacts, find interested parties and say, hey, have a look at this. And this can range from blog searching to finding people on Twitter, to finding relevant groups on LinkedIn or Pinterest or Instagram. There's a variety of tools there. So this idea of you being a brand it's unusual for many, but it's by no means unique. And the first thing you have to consider then, if you're going to be a brand yourself, is that how do you behave online? How can you be found online? And it seems only fair that I put myself up to be looked at here, because it's one thing to tell you this, but you can go, yeah, but do you rank well in Google? And if you put my name into Google, these are obviously the search results that come back from me. As most of you will know, Google now returns search results very much based on the individual, on your location, on the platform you're using, on what you've looked for in the past. And in this case, you type in Craig McGill if you're based in Scotland, and here's what comes up. And this isn't bad. A link to my website, a link to me on Twitter, a link to my LinkedIn, links to a couple of Google Plus posts, some images, a link to my Wikipedia, a link to me speaking professionally to New Media Breakfast, a link to me speaking for Falkirk Council, and a link to my books on Amazon. And while some of those links may need a little updating, for example, I think the Wikipedia will need updated by someone, my own blog site certainly needs updated, and the Amazon links could do with a bit of love to reflect digital publications. It's not a bad profile when you consider that most people now just look at the first page of Google, and if they don't find what they want, they go away. I'm quite happy with what you see there. There's pictures of me, there's links to professional work. From a professional point of view, that's quite good. But what you have to bear in mind is, if you are going to be online, if you are going to be searched for and found by Google, Bing, Yahoo and other search engines, what's the personal you and what's the professional you? Do you have a Twitter account purely for work? Do you have a Twitter account that's locked down for private reasons? Do you just have one Twitter account and it's locked down? Is your Facebook profile fairly open for all to see, or is it fairly closed? Should you even be on Facebook? Should your family be on Facebook? If you're, say for example, a crime reporter, I've known many a crime reporter that refuses to have a photograph or any information online for very obvious reasons. If you do have professional accounts online, what sort of photos do you have there? Always consider that to many people, the photo you have in your online profile is your byline picture. So ask yourself if it's suitable and appropriate in that sense. And equally, do you have guidelines in place for yourself? Are there things you go, well, if this was a personal account, I could say this, but it's not really. This is all about my work, my job, and my opinions as a journalist me, not as a parent me, or the person who goes to the pub on a Friday night me. So this is worth bearing in mind. And if you are thinking, well, perhaps I need some guidelines, but where can I find some thoughts? That link there provides information to more than 200 organisations, including the Associated Press and, if I remember correctly, the BBC. And that gives you an idea of social media guidelines that are handed out to staff at these organisations. And you can take something from that and say, well, okay, that's a nice idea, I'll take this, I'll take that. Or it may just boil down to one simple thing. Don't put anything online that may cost you work. Don't put anything online that may make you look like an idiot. Don't post anything online when you're drunk. It may just be that simple, that straightforward. And it may be again that you have separate accounts. Most social media networks frown upon this, but they rarely do anything about it. So you could have, for example, your personal Facebook site just for you and friends, but a Facebook page for you as a journalist. You could even just have two personal accounts, though Facebook really does frown upon that. You could have a Twitter account for you as a journalist and a Twitter account for you as a person. You just have to consider how you use these platforms, what you'll be getting out of them, and how you're going to engage on them. The other aspect to this idea of you as a brand is maximising you as a brand online and making the best of your time online. And we live in an age where you just can't go on the internet, including relative forums and social networks, and find everything of relevance. There's just too much out there now. There's now 2 million searches carried out on Google every 60 seconds. And at least 2 or 3 of those 2 million searches, you would imagine, are someone going, are there really 2 million searches on Google every 60 seconds? But the point being this, there are tools now to make this easier for you so that you can maximise your time online, you can maximise your profile, and you can maximise your exposure. And when we look at these tools over the next few pages, what to bear in mind is that you can set these items up to search for you. They can search up for fellow journalists, they can search for competitors, they can search for companies, they can search for keywords related to your industry. They will search pretty much for anything you tell them to do, so you can use them in as wide and imaginative a way as you see fit. So with that in mind, let's have a look at some tools that can be very useful in this field. The most well-known one is obviously Google Alerts, a free service by Google where you type in a search query and it will send it to you by email, and it will send it to you as it finds it, perhaps once a day, or however you specify. I quite like as it happens, because then as soon as Google finds it, you hear about it, which can be very, very useful. And as already said, this can be for your name, it can be for a subject of interest, it can be for whatever you want. It's a great little tool. But some people find that it's not as good as it used to be, and that it struggles to pull in material from Facebook, LinkedIn, and other social networks. And that's where a tool like mention.net can be invaluable. As with many tools that we mentioned today and throughout this course, it uses a freemium model where you can have a couple of searches for free, but if you want more than that, you have to pay for it. And the free version of mention.net gives you 2 free searches. Now, the one difference it has to Google is that it only emails you once a day. If you want to see mentions as they happen, you have to keep this dashboard open in the background of your machine. That's no big problem. You can schedule yourself to go and look at it every hour, every couple of hours, depending on how hot the topic you're looking at is. And again, it's a fantastic little tool. It just comes back and says, here's what I found, and here's a link to it, and it presents the information in a very nice way. So a really good tool to consider using if you've been frustrated with Google Alerts of late. Now obviously, as news gatherers and content producers, Twitter plays a large part, not just in seeding information out there, but also searching for information and also engaging with people, whether it be new contacts or old contacts, whether it be people you're working with or people you want to work with. And it would be remiss not to spend some time looking at options for Twitter in that sense. So with that in mind, there's your traditional Twitter front page. You log into Twitter, there you go, that's what you get. The one big column down more or less 2/3 of the page, smaller column to the left. And it's functional, it is what it is. You can click on tweets, you can click on following, you can click on followers, you can click on lists. It is what it is. But there are better ways of doing it, and for those of you who don't know it, this is Hootsuite. And what Hootsuite does is takes the account information and presents it over columns. Hootsuite has a lot of other functionality as well that we'll refer to throughout the course, but we'll keep it fairly basic for now. So if you set up a Hootsuite account and bring in your Twitter stream, this, for example, is what you can see. In this case, in this screen you see all the home feed for the main journalism account, and that's just everyone that's being followed, and then you see mentions, and then you see sent tweets, and at a glimpse you get a lot more information there than you do with a traditional Twitter stream. But it's not just about one or two little mentions. You can develop this very clever ways. If you see something of interest, for example a hashtag like JournChat, click on it, and there you go. There's all the mentions of that hashtag. Equally, hashtag long reads or hashtag newsRW, which is a London-based journalism event taking place in February, and you see everything. And again, that's a lot easier than have to click about. You look at that quickly, you've got the information you want. This could equally be lists, or a couple of key journalists, or a couple of key contacts, or a couple of people you're doing writing work for. Very useful. So well worth spending perhaps 10-15 minutes setting up Hootsuite so that you can see and get a lot more information at a glance than you would with normal twitter.com. One thing that's also worth bearing in mind is that if you're looking for information on a specific person or running your own specific account, there's 3 ways to see all your mentions. If we go from right to left, there's obviously running a search phrase for yourself where you put in your name, or the name of whoever you're looking for. In this case it's Craig McGill, and it brings back results there. And that can be worth considering because not everyone may know you're online, not everyone may be looking to get your attention online, they may not be looking to get the attention of a brand that you're working for or a brand you're investigating, so always worth considering that. In the middle we have the traditional mentions where Hootsuite, just like Twitter, has said, I found all these mentions of you, there you go. And to the left we have a search for the Twitter handle, and you may be going, well, what's the difference there? In Hootsuite, the mentions only shows all your mentions. If you do a search for @Craig McGill in this case, it will show you all of your retweets as well. So while that can get a lot more messy, pardon me, if you send a piece of material out that gets retweeted far and wide, you get to see what everyone said about it, you get to see every mention of it. And that can make it handy because you can get up to 10 of these. You can only get 4 of them on a screen at a time, but you can have 10 columns per tab on Hootsuite. And that, as I say, great way of getting a lot of information at a glimpse, speeding up the time you're spending online. And it's not just about tools like Hootsuite. Equally, there are other tools that offer similar, but most people I know in the industry are using Hootsuite. There are tools like TrendsMap, which if you go to trendsmap.com, shows you at various levels what everyone's talking about in the world, and that can be a mixture of hashtags, Twitter names, or even just words. And as you can see, this is what was being spoken about when I grabbed the screen grab. Equally, that's just moving along to the rest of the world. But it also scales down, especially even on the free version, where you can go down to this sort of level where you see the central belt of Glasgow. You can equally have it provided by a list. This is for Berlin, this is for Glasgow, and as I said, you can see a mixture of Twitter names, words, hashtags, and so on. And it's not just for 1 or 2 places. That provides a vast reach of information. Now, it doesn't go as in-depth as something like Hootsuite does, which will let you actually pick a location and see all the tweets from one area, but this does cover quite a few major geographical areas, so it can be a useful tool. For example, once or twice a day you want to see what all the chat is on Twitter in London or Newcastle or New York. Click on that and you get a very quick glimpse of it, and you can see who's saying the chat as well if you go for the paid for models. So it's worth looking at if you're looking to write about something topical. That's a great way of finding an idea to write about. But it's not just Twitter that offers this. Google does as well with the appropriately named Google Trends. And again, just from looking at this, you can see what people have been searching for in volume. It's presented in a very nice, picturesque way. You can search not just for one country, you can search for Russia, Portugal, Italy. No, you can search globally. It doesn't let you drill down further than that, but it's still quite a good way of getting a snapshot, especially if you combine it with trend maps. You could say, for example, hey, what's everyone in the UK talking about? Let's look at Trends Map. That shows me the chat on Twitter. This shows me what everyone's looking for on Google. And between that, you're going to get a pretty good idea of what the online discussion around a certain city or country is at that moment in time. It's also provided by Google in a very straightforward way, so you can see roughly how many searches are taking place at any one time. As you can see here, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Bruno Mars and the Super Bowl have been the considerable topics of discussion when this screen grab was taken. It also prevents you historical trends from the past, and again, this can be a great idea if you're doing any sort of long-term analysis, or if you're looking for ideas to write and you at a glimpse you see material there. You can go, oh yeah, that was quite a big thing, I'll write about that, or the SAG Awards, Oscar nominations, all of these things. Good material either from a historical perspective, or if you're looking for ideas on what to write or what's been important over the last few days. No more do you need to do a big, huge, long cut through, trawl through cuts. But equally, if you want to define yourself as an expert in a field, there's nothing to stop you setting one up yourself so that your peers and others in the industry can come and find. This is one that's set up for Meta Scotland, and this is very much about the tech and creative sector in Scotland. And at a glimpse, there's some great material there. There's Twitter streams, there's links to calendar feeds so that I pull that down. All the events will automatically go into my diary. That's a fantastic tool, a fantastic gift. And from there, you can build contacts, you can reach out to people, you can use this as a story gathering device. And if you have one of these of your own, if you don't find one that's relevant to you, people will then come to it. People will come and populate it, and it will make you look like the expert in your field. It will make you look like the person to come to for information or to build contacts with. Now, another great tool, not vastly used by many, but still incredibly time-saving, is RSS, and it stands for Really Simple Syndication. And what RSS means is that if you click the RSS button on a website, it then gets saved into another app, normally called an RSS reader, and any time you open your reader, it goes and gets the information from your website. It's very much a very useful type of paperboy. And for example, I currently run searches for RSS feeds for about 300 sites. So once or twice a day when I open this up, it shows me all of the RSS feeds. It shows me all of the latest information. It doesn't show me information from a week ago. It shows me the latest information as it's pulled in. And that saves me going round 300 individual sites. And it's a great time saver. It's very much an even more digital version of the PA or Reuters newswires that many people have seen in the newsroom. But again, this was something that not a lot of individuals outside of journalism had seen. So a fantastic tool and a great asset, great time-saving tool. And if you are looking to do RSS, Feedly is currently one of the more popular ways of doing it. It presents your information in a very magazine-style format, and it's great to read on an iPhone. It can be good to read on an iPad or other tablet too. And it just, again, makes the consumption of information nice and useful. And a nice little touch by Feedly, as you'll see if you look to the right-hand side, is that it also gives you suggestions for other things to read, other things to follow that might be very worthwhile. Flipboard does a very similar sort of job in that you can present it with links or individual material and it will update them. Now that can either be for you or it can be for topics you're interested in, and again it gives you a magazine style format, especially on an iPad. It's well worth playing with to see if it works for you. You can also set it up in various ways that it pulls in RSS feeds. So you open this up in the morning sitting on the bus or the train and you see all the great relevant up-to-date information for topics you're interested in. But regardless of where you're getting this content or how you're saving this content, you also have to consider how you're going to maximise your content creation time online. And one of the best tools for this is an editorial calendar, which is very straightforward, does what it says in the tin, in that you go, okay, here's a calendar for the month. What am I writing about? What am I writing about for me? What am I writing about for clients or for people I work with? And you fill it out. And it can look quite daunting at the start, but it's not something that has to be approached with trepidation. An editorial calendar fills itself up fairly quickly. And one of the best ways to start doing that is to think in terms of broad themes. Just as newspapers, magazines have sections and supplements and days where sport gets more of an emphasis or jobs gets more of an emphasis, you can have that idea to your online life, to your blogging, to your Twitter, to your Facebook and Pinterest and elsewhere. And this is one that I pulled together that's fairly generic, that would work in any sector, any industry. For example, you could have what's happening in the week ahead, more or less a preview piece. You can have an original piece of writing the next day, interviews on a Wednesday, and so on. And the point being that you don't need to do it over 7 days. This is just a straightforward way of looking at it over 7 days, and it's a mix of material that shows off your writing, brings other people in, which is equally important because you need to have other people on your site to boost traffic, because they'll go and tell their friends and followers that they've been writing on your site, and that will bring more of an audience back to you. And while Google is currently on a little bit of a crusade over guest bloggers, they can still be very useful. But if you're worried about Google penalising you for having guest bloggers, what to do is make sure the coding on the site is set to no follow. And if anyone wants a bit more information on that, we'll probably touch upon it in a week or two, or feel free to get in touch with me directly. But as I say, the idea here is that you could look at this and go, okay, what's happening the week ahead? I'll write a blog about that, what's happening in my sector. And then the rest of it makes you think, well, is there something there that works for Facebook? Is there something there that would work for video? Is there something there that works for Instagram or Pinterest? What would my tweets around this be? Is there something of relevance to LinkedIn? So it keeps your brain thinking, because this is where cross-platform takes off. You might have a lovely 800-word blog post, but you have a bit of video that goes with it. Are there any visuals you can share with it? Are there any infographics you can share with it? Either material you've created or curated from elsewhere on the web. It's as you start to think this way that, regardless of how you're writing, if you're writing journalism or you're writing a press release, that you just think beyond going, I've written my 500 words, job done. Start to think, how do I make it more visual? In essence, you're doing a little bit almost of the job of a picture desk and a sub-editor, because you're thinking headlines to break text up, you're thinking video, you're thinking images, but it all comes back to you, and it comes back to this idea, as mentioned before, that you have so much more control over what you present online than ever before. And if you are struggling for how to fill it, go to the likes of Google Alerts, go to the likes of mention.net, search for issues, put in something that interests you, or even search for your name, or search for a competitor, search for someone in the news, and just tie it back to relevance in your field. I often say that when people go, I've nothing to talk about, you don't speak to your colleagues at work, you don't speak to contacts when you meet them, anything that you'd have a conversation about, if it's interesting enough for you to have a conversation face to face about it, it's certainly interesting enough for you to have a blog about it. And again, go look at Google Trends, see what's happening there, what's happening across the world, what's happening locally. Have a look at the hot searches, see what's been spoke about in the past. Is there any way to update it? Is there any update you can provide to the Golden Globes? Is there any update to Nest being purchased by Google? What are the latest developments there? But another one that's great to look at as well is Getty Images archival calendar, which is past and present events, but it's also marked out for days, weeks and months ahead. So if you're thinking, okay, in February I've got a blank sheet, what do I want to talk about? You can go and have a look at previous things, what's happened in the past, have a look at trends, have a look at mentions, and then from there go, okay, what else is coming ahead? What's on the days ahead this week, this month, perhaps even this year, and see what you can start to fill out. And when you start to add that in with information you get from your contacts and other ideas, you'll see a calendar filling out quite nicely. But then how do you make sure that this gets out there? And there's a couple of good ways of doing it, because obviously you write your material and jump onto Twitter, jump onto Facebook and send it out there. But tools like Hootsuite provide other options too. For example, you can go into Hootsuite and it will auto-schedule your material. So you can do your quick 9 8, if you've written an article first thing in the morning, 9:30 you do a tweet and you're going, okay, I wonder if there would have been a better time to do this. You can auto-schedule your tweet as well. And remember, you can do more than one tweet per story. In fact, I would encourage it, and we'll come back onto that next week as well. But what I would say is you schedule that, and you auto schedule it, and Hootsuite and Twitter do the hard work there. They go, okay, that's where his audience is. Bang, let's put it out there. The danger you might have there is if you have an audience that's quite far spread over geographical regions, and it may not be overly sure about the best time to reach someone in New York or to reach someone elsewhere. But fortunately, there are other tools that make this very useful, and one of the more popular is Buffer, which is a very straightforward plugin for most web browsers. In that, as it says here, you find something on the web, you click the Buffer button, and you share it. And Buffer will work out the best time to share it, and then equally, as you share more, Buffer will find material and suggest it to you, and it's very hit and miss. But again, it's a nice idea that you're scheduling material, but the software is learning from you and going, they keep posting about the Winter Olympics, or they keep posting about economists in London. Here are related things I found that they may find useful. And again, that makes you look quite authoritative online, because you're not just promoting your own stuff, you're not just sharing your own material, and it saves you time of thinking, oh, when do I put this online? When do I put that online? Another great tool, if used properly, is known as If This Then That. This very straightforward application pretty much says, if this happens, do this. For example, if traffic on my WordPress blog goes through the roof, email me. If the New York Times publishes something, send me an alert to Twitter. It's very, very simple, very, very straightforward, and we're seeing it being used in quite creative ways. As you can see here, there's a lot of options for it, including the Philips Hue. So you could, for example, set it up so that if you received an email from your boss or a colleague or certain people, the lights in your house would change colour. The Philips Hue being the light bulbs that you can control via Wi-Fi or from your smartphone. So it could be that you're sitting in the house at night and suddenly the lights go from light blue to red, and that tells you an urgent email's dropped from your boss. So you don't have to be sitting checking your phone all the time. Your lights will actually tell you when you have an email. And again, things like sending pictures to Instagram, Instapaper. There's a lot you can do with this. It can be a very, very creative option and worth considering. This, when I did these screen grabs, this was the most popular options at the moment, and some of them are quite funny. Some are, when the Super Bowl starts, turn your lights to orange or lime. That's just a giggle. But you could also have a news gathering function there, and that save every Instagram posted at the Super Bowl to your Google Drive, and you would need considerable storage for that. But it's the same sort of thing that you can do, and it's some people find it revolutionary. I'm not so convinced about that, but it can be a handy little time-saving tool, and you can quickly start to make little bespoke improvements to your productivity. Here's some more examples again. Add Feedly subscriptions to a Google Drive spreadsheet. If you Instagram a photo, it also automatically goes to Twitter. Save National Geographic photos of the day to Dropbox. There's just some nice things there that make your working life a lot easier. Now, we've covered quite a lot today, and it's worth considering a few things aside from the tasks that have been mentioned in the course forum on Moodle. Some things to look at is Google yourself and or your key interest, key professional industry, and a couple of surrounding phrases, and see where you already appear, if you do appear at all. Do you appear on page 1? Do you appear on page 2? Page 3? Nowhere. And this is relevant because most people now, as I mentioned earlier, don't go past the first page of Google on a tablet or a desktop. On a mobile phone, they'll only swipe with their thumb 3-4 times at most to find information. So it may be, as a longer term project here, you see where you are just now and then go, no, I want to try and improve that ranking. And that can take months. That's something that even by the end of this module you'll still be doing, but it's a good ongoing project to start thinking about. Equally, you'll look at setting up Hootsuite. We'll be referring to it over the coming weeks and months. So set it up, create columns for relevant hashtags, other journalists lists, and if you find something useful, let us know, share it in the forums. And Hootsuite, for most people, you should be able to get by on the free option at the moment. There are paid for models, but you should be okay for going with the free model. Equally, please find at least four RSS feeds to follow and share them in the forums. Create your own editorial calendar. You've seen examples here. I've also uploaded the version to the private Moodle site and the forums, and read the links in the course module. There's quite a few there covering this idea of the journalist as a brand and what that means for the individual, and equally what that means for news organisations. As always, if you have any questions, you can get me via the two Twitter IDs at the bottom. You can also get me via my email address, either the Napier one or my more mainstream one. And thank you very much for listening. Hope to have you tune in, listen, watch, whatever you want to call it. Hope we'll be interacting next week again. Take care.